This is actually my second time visiting Rainbow Valley. My first visit was back in 2017 when I was driving from Kings Canyon back to Alice Springs. It was already late in the afternoon, and Rainbow Valley was more like a stop along the way than a planned visit. But I still remember arriving near sunset, and the moment I saw those red sandstone cliffs glowing in the evening light, I was completely amazed. It was one of those places that looked almost unreal when I first saw it. Ever since then, I've always felt there was some unfinished business with this place. I wanted to come back, spend more time here and film it properly. So here I am, in May 2026, returning to Rainbow Valley, not just to see it again, but to slow down and hopefully capture a little bit of what made this place stay in my mind for so many years. The reserve is located south of Alice Springs in Australia's Northern Territory. From Alice Springs, the drive to Rainbow Valley Conservation Reserve takes about 1.5 hours each way, with a total distance of roughly 100 kilometers. At first, the journey is quite straightforward, following the sealed Stuart Highway through the open Central Australian landscape. But after turning off the highway, the road changes completely. The final section is an unsealed access road, and the last 22 kilometers can be heavily corrugated with some sandy patches along the way. A 4-wheel drive is recommended, especially if the road conditions are rough. Also, it is worth being prepared before you go, because for at least half of the trip, you may not have any mobile phone signal, but in many ways, that final stretch is part of the experience. As the open road begins, the landscape starts to change. Everything becomes red. The road, the dust, the low hills. Even the light seems to carry a reddish glow. It feels like entering a different world, one shaped by heat, time, and silence. And then, at the end of a wide open space, the main rock formation of Rainbow Valley appears. From a distance it looks beautiful, but almost calm, like a long wall of sandstone sitting quietly on the edge of the plain. But the closer you walk towards it, the more you begin to feel its size. The cliff slowly rises above you, and the layers, colors, and textures become much more powerful than they first appeared from the road. What makes Rainbow Valley so fascinating is that this is not just a beautiful rock sitting in the desert. It is a piece of very old geology exposed in front of you. The cliffs here are made of sandstone, commonly described as Hermannsburg sandstone, and they are around 350 million years old. To imagine that age is almost impossible. Long before this part of Australia became the dry red desert we see today, layers of sand were being deposited in an ancient landscape. Over time, those layers were buried, compacted, and slowly turned into sandstone. Then came the much longer process of erosion. Wind, rain, heat, and time gradually wore away the softer parts of the rock. What we see now is what has survived. the stronger sections left standing while the surrounding material was slowly removed. That is why the main formation feels so dramatic. It rises almost suddenly from the open plain, like a natural wall at the end of the valley. The colors are also part of the geological story. The red and orange bands come mainly from iron-rich minerals within the sandstone. In earlier, wetter periods, water moved through the rock and dissolved some of the iron in the sandstone layers. Later, during dry periods, those minerals were drawn back towards the surface and cemented into the rock, staining some layers a deeper red. Other parts of the sandstone were leached, leaving paler bands of cream, yellow, and white. Over time, this created the contrast that gives Rainbow Valley its name. So the colors are not only caused by sunset, the sunset simply reveals them at their most dramatic. The low afternoon light catches the cliff face, and suddenly the old iron-stained sandstone begins to glow. Red, orange, gold, and sometimes even purple. You can also see how fragile the formation is. Some layers are harder and darker, while others are softer and more easily worn away. That difference helps create the shapes, ledges, holes, and unusual rock forms around the valley. It is beautiful, but it is also delicate. These cliffs have taken millions of years to form, but the surface can be easily damaged, which is why it is important to stay on the marked tracks and not climb on the formations. But this place is not only beautiful from a geological point of view. Rainbow Valley is also a living cultural landscape. It is on the traditional lands of the upper southern Arrernte people, who know this place as Wura. The area has important archaeological sites, including evidence of ancient Aboriginal connection to the land, so it is important to stay on marked tracks and respect restricted areas. Like many visitors, our attention was first drawn to the main sandstone cliff. It is the image most people associate with Rainbow Valley, but the more we explored, the more we realized that the valley has much more to offer than its famous front face. Walking behind the main formation, the landscape begins to open up again. The towering sandstone wall that seemed so dominant from the front now becomes part of a much larger scene. Scattered across the valley floor are smaller rock formations, each shaped by the same forces that created the main cliff. Some stand alone like sculptures, while others appear to emerge naturally from the surrounding earth. One of the most interesting formations is the so-called mushroom rock. It is a classic example of differential erosion. Over millions of years, wind and rain have worn away the softer layers of sandstone more quickly than the harder layers above them. The result is a shape that looks almost impossible at first glance, a narrow base supporting a much wider cap of rock. Standing beside it, it is easy to forget that what looks permanent is actually part of a very slow process of change that is still happening today. Every crack, every ledge, and every unusual shape here is a reminder that the landscape is constantly being reshaped, even if those changes are too slow for us to notice during a single visit. Beyond the sandstone formations, another feature begins to dominate the horizon. Rising behind the valley is the James Range, a rugged chain of hills stretching across the landscape. From a distance, the range almost looks like a backdrop to the main attraction, but it is actually much older and forms an important part of the geological story of Central Australia. The contrast is striking. In front of us are isolated sandstone formations standing in the open plain, while behind them the darker ridges of the range create a sense of scale that photographs rarely capture. It is only when you see a person walking through the landscape that you begin to appreciate just how vast this place really is. As we followed the walking tracks through the valley, the scenery constantly changed. Every turn revealed another angle of the cliffs, another unusual rock shape, or another view towards the distant ranges. The longer we spent here, the less it felt like a single landmark and more like an entire landscape waiting to be explored. Along the track, we also noticed dozens of small fruits scattered across the ground. At first glance, they looked like miniature watermelons lying in the red dirt. Curious, we picked one up. They were surprisingly hard, and even after managing to break one open, it quickly became clear that they were not something you would want to eat. These are commonly known as wild melons, a familiar sight in many parts of inland Australia. Their appearance might suggest something sweet and refreshing, but the reality is quite the opposite. It was one of those small discoveries that travel often brings. Not spectacular enough to appear in postcards, but memorable because it reminds you how different life can be in the Australian desert. And perhaps that is what I enjoyed most about walking behind the main cliff. Away from the viewpoint and away from the photographs, Rainbow Valley revealed a quieter side of itself. A place of hidden formations, distant ranges, desert plants, and endless space. And if there is one time of day that really brings Rainbow Valley to life, it is sunset. That is when the cliffs begin to glow, the colors deepen, and the whole place starts to feel almost unreal. Rainbow Valley is not one of those places that everyone talks about. Apart from the locals, not many people seem to know it well, but maybe that is exactly what makes it feel special. Quiet, remote, and full of colors that change with the light. As the sun softened behind the ranges, Rainbow Valley slowly returned to silence. The colors in the rock faded, but not the feeling they left behind. Out here, time doesn't feel measured. It feels absorbed into stone and wind, and as we turned away, it felt less like leaving a place, and more like leaving a moment suspended in the desert.